Mitch Lawrence, SiriusXM NBA Radio, longtime NBA writer, covered the 90s NBA, beat writer. A lot of interesting stuff from last night. Mitch also, there was a quote from Larry Bird back in 2009 that he told Mitch Lawrence about why he never shook hands. And Bird says, I thought if I did, I'd lose my edge. I always wanted to keep an edge. I always wanted to have that upper edge. And that was a big factor of last week's episodes with not shaking hands with Isaiah. And then, we move forward here into this episode and we see kind of, the last of the first three-peat. We're going to get into that and much more as Mitch Lawrence, SiriusXM NBA Radio. He joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline, where I thought last night, the Rodman stuff was entertaining and it was interesting, but I thought last night really, Mitch, kind of took you deep into the competitive nature and the competitiveness that drove Michael Jordan. What's up, man? Mitch, you got me. Hey, Mitch. Oh, there we go. Oh, sorry. That was my fault.
I was going to say.
Completely my fault.
No, I was going to say you didn't push the button. I was going to say I covered that Portland-Chicago series. Now, I've been on your show for a little while here. Do you think I actually broached the idea that Clyde Drexler was Michael Jordan's equal or even better?
Those type of things where they thought that this guy was on the same level as being no disrespect, but man.
I heard, and Mike, I've known Mike Fratello a long time. They played that little clip where he basically said there isn't a whole lot of difference between the two. Guess what? As Michael Jordan showed Clyde Drexler, how about the anecdote where Magic Johnson says the night before the opening game of the series, I'm at Jordan's house playing cards. Of course they were playing cards. Michael Jordan played cards with everybody. He wanted to win everybody's money. And he says, and Michael Jordan said, you know what's going to happen? I'm going to show this dude how it is, something like that. And what Irvin said was that nobody could think they were even going to be even ever better than Michael Jordan. He was always out to prove that. And poor Clyde Drexler, it's just like poor Toni Kukoc, it's just like poor Dan Marley, all these guys who Michael Jordan heard were being praised were like, well, Dan Marley, he's a great defender. Jerry Krause said that one time. Michael Jordan took that to heart, and he all those kind of comments and those kind of inferences and suggestions, and just, it just added the fuel to the fire, as they say. And so, Clyde, who is a very good player, don't get me wrong, I've known Clyde Drexler a long time, covered a bunch of Maverick Portland games, including playoffs. He's a great guy and a really good player back in the day. He wasn't anything in Michael Jordan's league when it came to winning finals.
And one of the takeaways from that last night too was at that time, I heard our midday guys were talking about this. I thought they asked a very interesting question, which was how much Jerry Krause drove this team to be great because they couldn't stand him and all the things that he did. I thought that was a very interesting point that one of our midday guys brought up today, and I was like, would they have the same success if Krause didn't tick them off all the time?
I wonder if that was Krause as part of his plan, or if he just basically kept his basically talked and they heard what he said and they couldn't deal with him. But a lot of the stuff that he said over the years and he did obviously continued to fuel them. But, once Michael Jordan started to win, there was no stopping him because he didn't have any equal on the court. And that was the thing. That's the thing that just always noticed we used to go back when you started in the 90s, and once you got to the Lakers series, and they won that, and from that point on, you'd always look at a series in the playoffs and say, does this team have a chance to beat Michael Jordan 4 out of 7 times? It's kind of like, for people today who can't relate to it as much, it's kind of like LeBron James in the Eastern Conference back when he was playing with Cleveland, when went 8 straight times to the finals. It was like you never saw a team or a player, even as great as Barkley was in an MVP year. Ewing had his moments. There was nobody who you were confident enough to say, he leading this team, they'll get 4 wins before Michael Jordan does in the playoffs. And the amazing thing there, Mike, is that the Knicks were up 2-0 in the 93 East Conference Finals. And you saw what happened once Michael Jordan once he went to Atlantic City and cleared his head.
Yeah, right.
And everything was fine. They won 4 straight.
Yeah, what do you, the old Bailey's Grand, which is not even open anymore. That building has been shuttered for years, by the way. So that one, when they showed that last night, it was a good chuckle because that building hasn't been open for a long, long time. But what do you remember from that time with the whole Atlantic City and that series and the 2-0? Because obviously you were pretty close to the Knicks.
Well, I was. And this is in all truthfulness, I can't say I was there because we were moving up from Dallas. I had joined the Daily News in March of that year. And although I was living here because of the birth of our daughter right around that time, it was supposed to be Memorial Day, it happened to be June 11th, I was not on the scene here, but I was still talking to people. I think a lot of it was overblown. The idea that Michael Jordan was not focused or competitive because he took a trip to Atlantic City is one of the more inane thoughts you could have. This guy was all out winning. We knew that. Why? He had already won in 91 and 92. And he hated the Knicks, and the Knicks hated him. And so if you think that one trip to Atlantic City was an indication that Michael Jordan was any less focused or any less of an assassin and killer, especially for the Knicks, a team he definitely hated. And he had a big history with them. He had a history with Patrick Ewing going back to 84. Come on, it was so overblown. You know, guys like Jordan, who's like what Brian McIntyre, the former NBA PR guy, said, you know, he's the alpha of the alphas. These guys, what do they need? They need to do things like gamble. They need to have some sort of, you know, they're so super competitive. And so when Michael Jordan takes a trip to Atlantic City, people up here in New York made a big deal about it, right? A lot of us were like, all right, let's see let's see how this impacts Michael. Probably not in a negative way, because when Michael Jordan started winning, like I said, there was no stopping him.
How about could you imagine, like they mentioned last night, that Jordan didn't talk to the media for 2 weeks? Can you imagine that happening now?
Yeah, I mean, that was a thing that, like I said, I wasn't around, but I had heard about that. And you know what? Here's a guy who all of a sudden, Michael Jordan, you know, is starting to be, you know, that people are getting on him for certain things now. You know, later on, it's about the golfing stuff and the betting and that. The Atlantic City stuff rubbed him the wrong way. Later on, it's, you know, he's not enough of a social activist. So he got tired of the media. For Magic Johnson to say it was Michael's going to quit this sport because of you guys. This is what Michael Jordan was doing. People were reporting about it, and he couldn't deal with it because it was affecting his reputation. And Michael was big into his brand. So yeah, I mean, now you look back and you go, wow, that's a pretty big deal, and it was. But you knew that Michael Jordan inevitably would return to talking to the media. They always do. But it is amazing to look at his life and his career in terms of the Air Jordan, the sneaker stuff. I mean, he exploded in terms of the brand and the marketing like nobody ever thought an NBA player could. And so when people are starting to take shots at him, he's up on his pedestal. He didn't like that at all.
I kind of relate what he did with the whole image thing. The book came out and it really started to piss him off, and the whole media thing, like you guys were talking about. I feel like he used that to his advantage when he was on the basketball court, similar to what you said possibly with Jerry's game plan. Let's fire him up. Let's get him wound up so he can go out there and compete at a high level. It's almost as if he used that to his advantage, knowing that people were looking at his image a different way. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah, the Jordan Rules, the Sam Smith book. There were some things that, Sam, like he talked about last night. And I've known Sam Smith a long time. He's at Bulls.com now. But back then he was at the Tribune, and he pulled the curtain back, like you said, on like what's going on. And, you know, basically showing Michael Jordan to be what he is, you know, cutthroat competitor, didn't stand any nonsense from people, punching people out, you know, whatever, as the acknowledged leader of the team and one of the great leaders in the history of the game. And so, yeah, this is the type of thing that Michael Jordan, as super competitive as he was. I mean, how about the deal last night where, you know, Michael's in the back of the plane and the hands there in the gambling are for, you know, a certain amount of money. He goes to the front. Paxson's playing with these other guys for like $1, you know, this tiny pot. And like, well, they're asking him, like, he says, I want to play. Like, why do you want our money? Because I want your money in my pocket, even if it's just $1. That's the way Michael Jordan was. The competitiveness is just something that we've always, I mean, you look at the talent, you look at athleticism, you look at the guys, just the brilliance at both ends of the court. It's the competitiveness that always separated him from a lot of the other immortals, I would think. And, he would use anything that he can grasp onto, even if they were imaginary threats or imaginary comments or, you know, he took something out of context. He didn't care because of his championship quest.
Now, with all that being said, when do you think, or what actually happened for him to realize? And I'm picturing the scene where he's laying down on the couch smoking the cigar and he said, I don't want to be doing this anymore. When do you think, or what do you think happened? What was the last straw for him to realize that in his head where it's, I don't know if I really want to continue with this type of lifestyle?
Well, I guess the scrutiny of the sport, I really don't, I don't know if there's ever been identified as one thing, but a lot of stuff apparently built, and he decided to pack it in. But that's a good question. Has anybody talked about that in this series? Has anybody written about that? I don't know if there was ever one thing. I guess it was just an accumulation of stuff. But even I always felt like we haven't seen the last of him because, first of all, you didn't know if he was going to succeed at baseball. Chances probably not. And the other thing was he was still, he quit at the top of the game, top of his sport, which never made any sense to me. Walking away just never made any sense. So figured he'd come back, and glad he did.
Mitch Lawrence, SiriusXM NBA Radio, looking back at the last dance from last night. And obviously they had the wins against Portland. And then I thought Barkley really added to the whole, I don't want to say, this Michael Jordan mystique, but he really added to, hey, that was the only time I felt that I wasn't the best player. Like, it was almost as if Jordan just beat the best players down too mentally. Like, they even knew that even their best wasn't good enough.
You're right. I mean, look, how many Hall of Famers did he take out in the playoffs over the course of his lifetime, his basketball life? A lot. And that's why his Hall of Fame speech was so great, because he continued to get on those guys and point out that they, that he always sent them home in the summer. And yeah, Barkley, that was a group. That Phoenix team was a 62-win team. The Bulls that year had third, I think, best record overall because the Knicks won the East, and that was the Knicks team that thought they were going to be better than Jordan, went up 2-0 in the whole Atlantic City thing, and then. So you had the Bulls going, without the home court, going against Phoenix, and the big thing there, guys, as you know, was that nobody else. I mean, nobody had three-peated. The great Celtics, the Lakers. You have to back to the Celtic dynasty of the '60s, where they just reeled off title after title to find another three-peat. And so, I'm sure Barkley took the court thinking that he was better than Jordan. But the difference is that once a guy starts winning and a team starts winning like the Bulls did, and they were a great team. That first, three-peat team. That's the team with Horace Grant, not Rodman. They had different components. The guys already knew how to win. You talk to players who win titles, and they'll always tell you. I've talked to guys on the Warriors about this when they were having their run back a few years ago. Guys like Andre Iguodala talked about how once you win a title and you figured out what you can get away with, what you can't, how you have to play, the corners that you can't cut, the sacrifice involved. The knowledge of what it takes to win is a huge deal. And Michael Jordan had that. And Barkley, let's face it, with those Suns, they had a 62-win team, don't get me wrong, but they did not have that championship pedigree. And Michael Jordan, what did he average in that series? 41 points or something? It was absurd. How great he was. And, for Barkley, Michael I saw last night, he's like, he didn't care that Barkley won the MVP. He said, I'll win here. He cared about all that stuff. It rankled him when other people won the MVP, and he didn't, because he always felt like he should because he was the best player on the planet.
Well, and he mentioned that last night. He said he thought it was BS that Barkley got the MVP, but that's, the Drexler stuff, the Barkley stuff, like those little things I think adds to why – we think Jordan is this, mythical great figure is because those things did bother him. Like, I hate to throw LeBron into it, but I don't think I could see LeBron saying, well, it pissed me off that Durant won the MVP. Like, that's just not, and that's fair. It doesn't matter, but that's just not the way that I thought the biggest one was when Ahmad Rashad said to him, who would take the last shot? And he says, that's a terrible question. I would. That's what separated him.
Yeah, that's true. But I will tell you this about LeBron, because a few years ago, and I'd have to go back and look, because I know I wrote this for the Daily News, so it's before 2015. It's when he's in Miami, LeBron, for those 4 years, and the MVP voting was coming out, and I was talking to Chris Bosh after Miami practice, And LeBron gave us the song and dance about it. He really didn't care. And I got Chris Bosh alone, and Chris Bosh said, of course he does. He says, guys like LeBron James, they add up all that stuff because he's comparing himself legacy-wise to people like Michael Jordan. So you're adding up how many MVPs, how many finals MVPs, how many this, how many that. So these guys like LeBron and Michael can say they don't care. They do. They absolutely do care. So that's the deal. They look at that because they're looking not just at the current landscape of against the players they're playing against. They're looking at the guys who came before them and how they're stacking up in history.
Yeah, see, I classify myself as a LeBron guy, even though I understand that Michael Jordan is the GOAT. And I feel like that's something that doesn't really go together. It's normally you're one or the other, but I do understand it. I feel as if LeBron, not to get too sidetracked of the MJ documentary, but it goes hand in hand because this conversation always gets brought up. Whenever someone mentions this MJ documentary, LeBron James's name is tied to that. And I think that there's power to that says a lot about LeBron. And I feel like he gets looked down upon because he isn't Michael Jordan. But that's ridiculous in my opinion because LeBron is dominating the league at such an elite pace. It needs to be appreciated, not talked down upon because it's not Michael Jordan.
Well, yeah. I mean, the thing about LeBron is that, now people talk about, and I always lose track, is he 35 or 36 because they haven't played in a while, but that's always a reference point. It's not that. It's all the seasons that LeBron has played here. And nobody in his, 17th year, I think this is, 16, 17, nobody's played at an MVP level. I mean, that's just unheard of. And that's one of the, obviously, the big disappointing things about this year, Hunter and Mike, is that you have a situation where, the one team, the one player who can ill afford to have this season canceled is LeBron James, because how many more years of elite play is going to have at his age with this many minutes, with this many seasons on his belt? And so we all are hoping it comes back in some form. I think we've talked about it before. I think most teams have played 64, 65 games. That's a representative chunk of a season. We had a 66-game season back in 2011, I believe. They can get right into the playoffs. Now, I know it still seems like we're ways from them, but the bottom line is, yeah, LeBron is going to suffer because this looked like the year he could, again, win a title. He needs to keep adding those chips because, let's face it, that 3-6 record he's got in the finals, I think that's what it is. He needs to add some more chips if he's going to even get to more of, get himself more in position to battle Michael Jordan. A lot of people think he's never going to make it in terms of being his equal. But, we'll see. The way he's played, though, he's been playing great. Let's see if he can continue.
Mitch Lawrence, SiriusXM NBA Radio, looking back at The Last Dance and so many cool things. The whole Kukoc story, I guess that gets lost in the sauce a little bit because things were so different back then. Like now we were, you talk about like the Sixers drafted Dario Saric and, for 2 years he waited overseas and you got to see him play in all these games. And there was you heard about Kukoc was almost like this mythical figure. And then you saw him in these Olympics, and that whole story of the fact that they were let us guard this guy and let's see how this goes. I thought that Kukoc story brought back a lot of memories of the fact that, at first they kind of looked at Kukoc how dare you think you're equal to us? Well,
it's funny. For tomorrow's show, I'm on Sirius with Zach Harper and Amin El-Hassan, and that's going to be tomorrow. But we've already done a little interview with Lenny Wilkins. Lenny was an assistant coach for Chuck Daly on that dream team. And we asked him about that whole thing with Kukoc. And, Lenny did say that, Jordan and Pippen before the game told people, the other guys on the team, you leave Kukoc to us, because as Scottie Pippen said in that documentary, our game plan was we were going to do everything we could to make Kukoc have a bad game, make Jerry Krause look bad, because Kukoc, because Scottie Pippen is embroiled in this huge war with Jerry Krause. It's over his contract. Jerry Krause is basically touting Kukoc as the guy who's going to be the next great Bull, and that did not sit well with Jordan or Pippen. And when they got to play Croatia for Team USA, I mean, here's Toni Kukoc who walks into the firing squad. I mean, he has no idea, because he has no idea what's going on back in Chicago between Jordan, Krause, Pippen, and Krause. So he is the unfortunate recipient of some of the greatest lockdown defense you've ever seen in basically, and it's more than an exhibition game. I'm going about it like they were playing in a play game back in the NBA. And so, yeah, that is a great story. And Kukoc, you know what? I think it was interesting when, Jordan, after they played him a second time in that thing, and Jordan left the court saying, he's not bad. He kind of earned Jordan's respect. He had a terrible game one. They shut him down. He had a good game. They lost again, obviously, Croatia, because Team USA was bowl. But Michael Jordan basically got a greater appreciation for him because they had heard all the stories about him, and they turned it into a negative. But Jordan said, you know what? He saw that this guy could be a good teammate for him down the line, which he was.
It was a great double episode last night. Mitch Lawrence on these Mondays has been recapping them with us, a guy who covered the league back then and still does for SiriusXM NBA Radio. And obviously we have 2 more next week and then 2 more the following week. So there should be some great stuff still to come. The baseball stuff, I guess, is going to be coming up here shortly, and we should find a little bit more about Jordan's decision and reasoning to go play baseball. There's a lot of conspiracy theories out there, of course, and we'll see what we find out next week on The Last Dance. Mitch Lawrence, SiriusXM NBA Radio. Mitch _. Let's give him a follow. We'll talk to him again. Thanks, pal.
Okay, guys. Thanks. Take care.
Mitch Lawrence, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda Hotlines.